how to actually write a research abstract. So first, I'm going to explain what is in a research abstract, and then I will give you some tips on how to write one, okay? Because all of you will need to write one, and your first draft is due like, I think in like a week and a half, right? So, or July 10th. So yeah, in 10 days, you will have to do your first draft of your research abstract. So here we go. An abstract summarizes, typically not in 15, sorry, that's a typo. It should be 150 to 250 words. So it's a short, brief, executive summary of your research project, right? It's the overall purpose of the study and the main research question that you're trying to answer. So again, if you don't know what your research question is yet, you need to have a meeting with your daily lab supervisor, with your faculty advisor, and get to the bottom of that real quick, because you need to know what is the bigger picture question that your project is trying to answer. The basic design of the study, so basically, you know, the basic materials and methods, and of course your major findings. What data, you know, what data trends did you find? And then an analysis, a brief. Again, this is 250 words. So this is actually really difficult writing because it's very dense, and it's very concise, and you have to be very deliberate with your word choice and your word count. So you don't have any fluff in here, right? It is very, very dense. You're getting straight to the point. You know, you have a couple sentences for each of these sections here. And then, of course, you have to tell them what your interpretation and your conclusion is of your data findings, right, of your quantitative data. So that is what an abstract is, okay? And I'm going to give you several samples of abstracts so that you can read. We'll put those up on the website along with a rubric for the abstract so that you can kind of take a look at it and start to evaluate for yourself. You know, and obviously the more abstracts you read, the better you will get at figuring out which ones are better than others and which ones are not so good and which ones are excellent. Okay, why is the abstract critical to your project? It's critical because we're going to be publishing it in our research journal. So, and I'll show you a picture of what our journal will look like shortly. So the left side, one side of the page will have your abstract and your kind of demographic information and your lab information, and then the other side of the journal will have your poster. Yeah, the abstract has to have the key information. And really what it is kind of like the hook. Most people, most scientists read the abstract first. Nobody just opens the journal article and reads the whole article. They read the abstract first. And then they decide, is this abstract worth my time? Should I spend the next 45 minutes to hour of my life reading this journal paper, reading the details of this research project? And they use the abstract to decide that, right? And most scientists, most, you know, people who've honed this skill, they read the abstract first, and then they immediately jump to the results. Let me see the results. Are these valid? Are these worth my time? And after they read the abstract, after they read the results, then they're like, okay, there's some interesting stuff here. This is good work. This is something that I want to look a little bit deeper into. And then they take the time to read the entire 15-page or 12-page journal article, or, you know, the rest of the poster. So the abstract really is critical for people to decide if they're going to continue to delve deeper into your research project. So it is very important. So how do you know if your abstract is enough, if it's good enough, right? So a simple rule of thumb is just imagine that you're another researcher doing a similar study, right? Somebody who's familiar with your research area. And then ask yourself, just in reading the abstract, am I happy with the amount of information presented, right? So like, is this enough information for me to evaluate and make a decision on whether I should continue reading and read the rest of the poster or the rest of the journal article? Does it tell the whole story about your research project? Like, does it have all the pieces, the essential pieces? If the answer is no to any of those two questions, then you probably need to work on the abstract and continue revising it. Here are my general tips and rules for how to write your own abstract, okay? you should be using an active voice. So, you want to write it from that active voice perspective. And you may have to have some passive sentences in there in your paragraph, in your 250 words, but try and avoid them if possible. Again, I already said this, you really need to be concise. There's no fluff in there, right? You don't have space. You don't have the word count to go on and on and on about something. You have to really, word choice is critical. So you have to have complete sentences, obviously, but you really need to be very selective in what words you use and make sure that every word has a descriptive purpose for being in your abstract. This speaks to the conciseness of it. You really need to get to the point quickly. And you should be really using past tense in your case, because this is an intense 8 to 10 week program. You're probably, you're not talking in past tense. Most of you will be like, I'm currently collecting data, right? Like I'm currently analyzing the information. But you do need to write it in past tense because, the assumption is that you've already completed the project, and that's why you're writing this abstract and that you're creating this poster. So for you, this will be very difficult because you're literally doing it. You're building the plane as you're flying, right? So it's going to be pretty intense for you all. And I recognize the difficulty of this in that you're not doing it really in past tense. So you really should be writing the abstract last. Like in a normal time frame, you would be doing this at the end of your after you completed the project. You all don't have that luxury. You will be writing it as you're completing the project. So sorry, there's not much we can do about that, but at least you should know how it should be done in the future. A good strategy is to begin your abstract with key phrases from each section of your poster, right? So you should do the poster first, and then once you have those sections completed, then you're really taking, you're taking what is the essence of that section of my poster, right? So once you're done with the introduction portion of your poster, what is the essence of it? And you take that one sentence or those two sentences, and then you put that in your abstract, right? So really is you're taking the key components, the main takeaways of each section of your poster, and you're putting it into your abstract. And then once you take those key sentences out and put them into your abstract, then you start the editing process to make the narrative flow. And again, and this is something I'll be saying with the poster, you are telling a story, right? And the best communicators of research are the best storytellers. And we talked about this a little bit in technical presentation lab. It's easier to tell a story when you're orally talking in an oral PowerPoint presentation. It's a little bit harder to tell a story in writing. Unfortunately, engineers have the stigma of not being very good writers. I hope that doesn't apply to you. If you know that it does apply to you and you don't consider yourself a strong writer, this is a skill you need to work on and build, because that abstract and that poster is essentially a writing sample. It's how well can you tell this story in writing. And of course, before finalizing, you obviously need to check to make sure that it's all correct. And the people you need to show that to is your daily lab supervisor and your faculty advisor. And they need to read your abstract, they need to read your poster, and they need to give you the final consent that what you're saying is actually true, and that it's accurate, and that it's correct. So you definitely need to have an editing process with your team in the lab. We will take a look at your abstract and your poster and give you some general feedback. However, we are not the content experts, your lab is. So they are the ones who are going to give you the bulk of your feedback. So here are the don'ts of writing a research abstract. You don't have the word count or length to give a lot of contextual background information. Unlike the oral PowerPoint, where you really get to explain key terms and explain concepts, you just don't have the space to do that in your abstract. You will have a little bit more space to do that on your poster, but not in your abstract. Acronyms and abbreviations are really not good to use in an abstract. Sorry, I should say you need to introduce the acronym, first in long form, and then in parentheses put the acronym, and then you can use the acronym after introducing it. But you can't jump straight into an acronym in an abstract because you can't assume that the reader is going to know what the acronym means. You don't really have space to reference other literature in the abstract. You do on the poster, and you definitely do in the PowerPoint presentation, but not in the abstract. So you can't really cite other people's work in the abstract. It really is your original work that you're working on in your project. Obviously, there's no image, there's no illustration, there's no figures, there's no tables in the abstract. It's just text, unlike the poster. Jargon or terms that might confuse the reader, you want to avoid those. You know, obviously, if your project is, you know, using a specific you know, algorithm, you have to reference that algorithm, then, you know, you have no choice. But you don't want to do too much of that, right? You want to be able to write it in a way that everybody's going to understand it. And that is definitely a balancing act. It is very difficult to do, you know, to write it in a way that everybody can understand it, but at the same time include all the technical terms related to your research project. And you definitely want to avoid being redundant. You don't have space in a 250 word abstract to say things twice, right? You really need to be able to concisely say it in one sentence. You don't want to use 3 sentences to explain one term or something like that. So, you know, avoid repetitive information in your abstract. So that is it on, you know, what is an abstract and my recommendations and tips on how to write an abstract.